Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be giving you some basics on socialism, as I've learned from Carolyn Borisenko. She has watched thousands of hours of hard left socialists like Barack Obama and the rest to understand their language, their coded language that they use, which you can find on her. One place you can go is her YouTube channel here. And to start off with, you want to watch the video How to Speak Socialist, third one over here. How to Speak Socialist. That's where it begins. Start learning the lingo. Whoops, I just lost it there. Learning the lingo of the socialists. And
Hi, I'm
okay. So start there. That's where I got the information that I'm sharing it with you today. She also has a Substack you can sign up for where I'm getting the information where she teaches this, and the graph I'm going to be using is from her website, free download that she gives. All right, it's a very excellent teacher, and she is the only one that I know of that is getting this information out there. If you know anyone else, please let me know. So we have to go through the coded language a little bit, some of the definitions, because they're using words in different ways, and if you don't understand it, you don't. This is how they've been getting away with everything. So, why capitalism is the number one enemy of the left and how it is linked to race, gender, queer, and the family. Capitalism is defined as private property ownership. That's it. Private property ownership. They don't want you to own your home, your business, your children, your individual rights. This all goes under the idea of capitalism as defined as private property. So they're attacking several different areas very successfully. And the first one they do is by bringing up race into it. And this is where it gets the most confusing for people. So, according to the socialists, capitalism created slavery in the US because it allowed ownership, right? Private property of people. Okay. Ownership of people based on private property on race. So that's where they get systemic racism from. Systemic racism, and when they talk about that, they're talking about capitalism. So they're claiming that white people, when white was created and racism were created when black slaves were brought in and owned under this capitalist system. So that's why whiteness means capitalism, systemic racism means capitalism. All right. Slavery created racial disparities or inequities, right? Because they want to bring equity, equal outcomes, which is socialism. Systemic racist, so but inequities is systemic racism, i.e., capitalism. All references to systemic racism or the system, any kind of system, is references to capitalism. They also think inequities are reproduced in the nuclear family, which we'll get to in a minute. And they also believe the police came out of slavery to retrieve runaway slaves. Okay, this is their belief system. It doesn't, common sense goes out the window here. Okay, they're just thinking that's why they want to defund the police because they think that's because the police support capitalism in their minds. It all goes back to capitalism and ownership. So white people are private property owners, and thus they are the oppressors. Now, when they say white people, they mean capitalists. They don't mean skin color. So the hardest thing for people and myself and anyone reading into this garbage is when you see white or when they talk about white, they're referring to capitalism, capitalists, not skin color. So anyone who upholds capitalism is white. And that's why with Larry Elder, they called him the blackface of whiteness or something like that. Or they hate black skinned people who support capitalism. They call them, everybody, it's whiteness, it's capitalism. Okay. So they're saying that, racism, this whiteness is code for capitalism, a reference to he who owns the power structure. So according to the socialists, capitalism and private property ownership, okay, they say it right here, because systemic racism was created by capitalism, it can only be solved by abolishing capitalism and replacing it with equity. And equity is socialism, right? So we see this come up again and again with Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan are socialists. Like this is showing some examples of articles. Prince Harry said, "None of us are immune to the effects of systemic racism." When he says systemic racism, he means capitalism. See, he's learning from Obama. Obama uses the same terminologies, right, of socialism. So Harry and Meghan are hardcore socialists. They're pushing the socialist agenda, which is intertwined with the globalist agenda, which I'll show in another video. But it's all together. They're all working together. The socialism is equity, bringing equity, equal outcomes, which means everybody owns nothing. You get what the government gives you. It's like communism. You don't own your home, the government gives it to you. You don't own food, you get a government grocery stores, which are starting to come in where you get what the government gives you if you behave. And if you don't behave, they'll shut off your CBDCs and you get nothing, right? That's why parallel economies have to be made. But anyways, that's going off the topic here. So anyway, so capitalism, enemy of the left, and is linked to race, gender, queer, and the family. So we just covered race. So they're saying capitalism caused slavery, caused racism, ownership, and therefore we need to get rid of, abolish capitalism. All right, next, gender. They want to get rid of male, female, or the gender binary. There, according to the socialists, they believe that capitalism created the gender binary, also called the patriarchy. When they say patriarchy, they mean socialism. Excuse me, capitalism. I'm screwing it up now. Patriarchy is capitalism. Whiteness is capitalism. Systemic racism is capitalism. And capitalism is evil because it's private property ownership. Nobody should own any private property, according to socialists. So they're saying capitalism created racism, systemic racism, so we need to get rid of capitalism. And capitalism created gender binary, which leads to the nuclear family, which they also want to abolish. They claim that women were relegated to being staying at home with unpaid labor, raising children. All men went to the workplace and got money and power. So when capitalism is abolished, this is what the socialists believe. When capitalism is abolished, the gender binary will also be abolished. And when gender binary is abolished, equity is achieved. Equity is socialism. So they want to get rid of the gender binary. So that's why you're seeing 350 different types of gender, and they separate it out as, how do you identify, or how do what are you attracted to versus what do you think you are? They get all, they're just trying to get rid of male, female is the bottom line. They're saying that it's what you're assigned at birth, BS, because they're saying it doesn't exist because they want to get rid of it, and that's queer theory. Okay, when they say queer, queer is a political ideology. It's not about being gay. It's not about being trans. It's ideology of eliminating gender. No more male, female. Now it's whatever. Trans and queer are not the same thing. Queer is a far left political ideology specifically designed to go against the norm or destabilize the norm. It's a rebellion against the system or capitalism. Anything considered normal must be attacked. Capitalism is perceived to be that system that upholds the norms of society and therefore must be abolished. Okay, so they're getting rid of all the norms. So get rid of gender binary, get rid of male, female. This is a socialist movement, okay? It's about getting rid of the male, female, which they believe was created by capitalism. And another example of this with Harry and Meghan is their passion on Archwell for investing in gender equity. Gender equity is socialism. Gender equity is abolishing gender binary male female. This also came up. I try to show these articles and like that. You remember back in 2019, Harry and Meghan are going to raise their baby in gender neutral style. Remember, the royal family palace shut that down quickly, but they first put out that they wanted to raise Archie gender neutral clothing, gender neutral everything. This is a socialist agenda. Meghan has told friends she wants to avoid gender stereotypes. This was her gender equity. She wants to get rid of the male female um, dichotomy, which they believe is created by Marxism. They don't want equality. Don't confuse equality with equity. Equality means the equal opportunity for something, meritocracy, which is capitalism. Equity means equal outcomes. Everybody just gets what they're given, supposedly in equal amounts. But there's a hierarchy in socialism as well, but they don't address that. They just address that all of you are going to get the same thing from the government. So yeah, so their attacks. So we just covered race, systemic racism, whiteness. That's capitalism that they want to abolish. They want to abolish gender, queer theory, which leads to the attack on the nuclear family, right? Because the nuclear biological family upholds capitalism through social reproduction theory. Capitalism cannot be abolished until the nuclear family is abolished. So, this is why they're going after destroying the families through taking away parental rights. And we're seeing that nowadays with the rights of parents being taken away if they don't allow their children to have sexual reassignment surgery to become um, to get rid of their gender binariness, their private parts. And it makes no sense. It sounds crazy, but if you put it together with the socialist agenda here, and again, I got this from Carolyn Borisenko's Substack. Uh, Take some time to digest all of this, but once you do, it all begins to make sense. She also gives you this download to go through why whiteness means capitalism. So, capitalism, again, defined as private property ownership. Examples of private property include your home, your land, the building you rent as a landlord, your business, your kids, or slaves. They want to get rid of parental rights because they feel like parents are treating their kids as slaves, and your individual liberties. Police are considered to be managers of private property or capitalism, so they need to go, according to the socialists. Private property ownership creates all problems in society, say the socialists. They claim that capitalism causes racism, patriarchy, transphobia, climate change, mental health problems. Okay, here's another interesting facet that Harry and Meghan also are a part of is they believe capitalism causes mental health problems. If capitalism is abolished, all these problems will be solved. That's why they're attacking everything, destroying everything, because they believe getting rid of private property ownership, parental rights, um, land ownership. They want to get everybody off their land. They want to take your homes. Uh, yeah, take away your individual rights. That's why I believe the globalists are forcing vaccines on people because they want to take away your individual rights. Because under socialism, you got to do what your government tells you. So when daddy government says you take this shot, you got to take it. And everybody is already saying that if people go on CBDCs, the government will say, well, you got to get your booster. And if you don't get your booster, they'll shut you off. Or if your child doesn't get a booster, they'll shut the whole family off to punish them. So you have to do what they tell you. And that's why they're not pulling back on these death shots that are obviously killing people. There's a whole other agenda, transhuman agenda with the shots as well. But this is where the globalists and the socialists are working together in many ways. But back to the socialists, whiteness created when white people brought black slaves to the U.S. So they're saying that racism didn't exist until capitalism or private property owning people created it. So capitalism is a system that they oppress under, according to the socialists. The result of capitalism created whiteness and systemic racism. So whiteness, systemic racism means capitalism. Whenever you hear whiteness or a white person, that's a capitalist. Systemic racism means capitalist to them, and capitalism is merely private property ownership. That's all. That's their definition of it. The only way to solve systemic racism is to abolish capitalism. Abolish capitalism. Abolish the police. Abolish the gender binary, abolish the nuclear family, abolish all your private property ownership, and your individual rights. So that's it. Now, how are they doing that? Well, Carolyn Borisenko, also covers this on her Substack, and here's from her tweet. She repeats this again and again in her videos as well. There are 4 goals that they're way they're doing this. Number one, gain as much power as possible. Number two, destabilize the system. Number three, attack or blame capitalism. And number four, usher in their Marxist or socialist utopia. All right, so how has this been? When you fully understand this, how they've been doing this, it becomes clear everything that's happening. So, for example, they have been gain as much power as possible. So the socialists have had a slow march through gaining power in institutions that they can't be gotten rid of easily, like the teachers union, the universities, university professors who get tenure and can't be fired. All the socialists have been moving over the years, over the decades, taking over these institutions. So as we know, the socialists have taken over the universities, especially the Ivy Leagues. They have taken over K through 12 through by taking over the teachers union and controlling it, and so controlling the curriculum in all K through 12 schools and government positions as power as well. So here are some examples of how the socialists have gained as much power as possible. And once they gain the power, they destabilize the system. They do something to cause chaos and pain. And when people start feeling the pain, the socialists turn around and say, "Oh, it's because of capitalism that caused this pain. Blame cap. Why don't we all try socialism?" And then that's how they want to bring in their socialist new world order. So, one example is because the teachers' unions have been taken over by the socialists. That's why during COVID lockdowns, they refused to open the schools. They closed down the schools. The unions were the ones blocking the reopening of America. They refused to open the schools to let the kids go back to school. They didn't care that kids were committing suicide and depressed and isolated and etc. They didn't care. They kept those schools closed because they wanted that pain. And then they turned around and said, "See, this is all capitalists' fault." They turn around and blame the capitalist government. All right. So that's one example of how they're using their influence to usher in their socialism. Another one is Mayorkas. He's definitely working, he's socialist and working with the UN, which is also helping the socialists take over. This is a combined effort of the UN with the socialist uh, groups here. So as you know, the invasion, if you watch Michael Yon on Twitter and all his information, he's been covering and showing how the UN and the US government working together because the US government's been taken over by Obama, Biden, and Obama's a socialist. So they're working together. They don't want borders, right? They want a one world government. So that's why you've got the socialist Mayorkas. What did he do? Number one, he got into a position of power, then he destabilized the system by opening the borders and keeping it open and just lying to everyone's face. Oh, yeah, it's closed, it's under control. But this is intentional to destabilize the system. And what do? They're letting millions of illegal, uneducated immigrants, some violent, into the country, and they are what they're do. One theory of what they're doing is, they're giving them all this money, right? So they're not allowing millions of illegal immigrants, and they're giving them phones, giving them plane tickets, taking them places, giving them housing. Some are staying in hotels. They built shelters for them. They're costing the taxpayers millions of dollars. And like the mayor in New York, he has taken money out of the school system and out of the police force to pay for the illegal immigrants. So eventually, this is going to crash the system, right? And then they're going to the theory is they're going to give the immigrants first the central bank digital currency because they'll take anything. So if they get all these millions of immigrants to start using central bank digital currency, then they'll bring the system in because they know Americans won't take it. So they're going to start with the immigrants and they're going to try to push it onto the rest of America through osmosis, I guess, eventually over time. This is a long term, plan. But also the immigrants, of course, with voting as well, if that's may also be the case as well. So more than one reason to bring illegal immigrants. But this is an example of taking power, number one, getting power, and number two, creating a crisis. And then number three, blaming capitalism for not being able to support all these illegal immigrants. So they're going to say, well, let's bring in socialism to pay for everyone. If everybody gets handouts from the government, then everyone will have the same thing. They claim it'll eliminate poverty. It's like, yeah, because everyone will be poor, so there'll be no poverty because no one will be poorer than the other, right? That's their explanation. It will be, as Klaus Schwab said, you owe nothing and be happy. So we started with teachers union. You get power, you create chaos, you cause pain, and then you blame the capitalist system, and you suggest let's bring in socialism. They call it a socialist utopia. Another word for socialism is Marxism. So you say a Marxist utopia as well. And the last example, last but not least, is of course Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan are socialists. I showed you those previous examples. So once again, we've got the same formula. What happened? Meghan gets power. And then what does she do? She creates chaos to destabilize the system because the royal family, according to them, are systemic racism. They're systemically racist, i.e., they're capitalists. They support the patriarchy or capitalism. So this was now Harry and Meghan also bring out one of the tactics that the socialists are using, specifically with the gender equity and getting rid of the gender equity, abolishing it. So they don't want male or female. They want the way they're pushing this ideology on kids is saying that your quote lived experience is more important than reality. Okay, so they're brainwashing these kids to think it doesn't matter what the reality of my physical body is. My lived experience is I think I'm some another whatever, binary, non-binary, asexual, pansexual. They have all these kind of different terms, right? But Harry and Meghan pushed this idea uh, of lived experience, right? When Meghan did that whole thing with the Oprah interview, and then Piers Morgan called her a liar, and then the weatherman came out and defended Meghan, saying it's her lived experience. So that whole idea of lived experience over reality is something that has socialism behind it. Okay. And it's the same thing with Samantha Markle. Meghan, on the Oprah interview, said her lived experience is being an only child. So she's trying to, with her socialist mindset of lived experience over reality, saying, I'm right because that's my lived experience. Never mind the reality that Meghan has a brother and sister. So that's the battle going on with Samantha Markle and Meghan right now, is a socialist backed battle going on. It's actually social. You can look at the uh, Meghan Markle, Samantha Markle court case not just as defamation between the two of them, but as a battle between socialism and capitalism. Meghan is saying my lived experience is more important, and Samantha is saying no, reality, the truth is more important. And this is the battle. One of the ways that these socialists are again are pushing their agenda of of saying their lived experience that goes under the gender stuff. That's how they're pushing this gender ideology and trying to make it seem like it's not socialism when it is. So all this stuff about lived experience and 350 genders, again, it's all about abolishing the binary in order to bring in socialism, destroying any genders whatsoever. In their utopia, in their socialist or Marxist utopia, there'll be no gender. Everybody will just be, nothing. And it's very brave new world. But there you have it. Um yeah, that's part of queer theory. And this is all and the queer theory of getting rid of all the genders, queer and trans, it's about transforming or transcending to transhumanism. And that's when you get into the globalist side of thing. Okay, because the globalists want to make everyone transhuman and get you into the internet of bodies and get everybody connected through nanotechnology and controlled by Starlink satellites and monitored and imprisoned, basically a prison planet under satellites and 5G towers and all that. So it all intertwines with each other. But I just wanted to point out that I would highly recommend visiting Carolyn Borisenko and learning about she has watched thousands of hours of these hardcore lefties, socialists, and understands. And she's the only one that I know of that has defined in their terms so you can understand what they're really doing, what they have been doing, what they've been getting away with doing because nobody has really understood their lingo, their coded language. So there you have it. That is my video on Harry and Meghan and socialism and how they are pushing socialist or Marxist utopia in with the socialists. And yeah, and it continues and it's ongoing. And unfortunately, according to Carolyn and others, they believe that the socialists are winning. And until people wake up to this and learn this, what's going on, they're going to win.